be teaching you how to make my basic vintage trouser. I derived this pattern from a 1940s trouser, but then I widened the leg, increased the rise a little bit, and added some patch pockets and some knee patches. I also provided you with the option to make it into a cute pair of shorts. To download this pattern, click the link in the description below to go to my Etsy Allie's patterns and you can print it off right at home. Let's jump right into step 1, which is cutting out your fabric. Make sure you follow all of the cutting instructions that I included in the packet. There is already a 1/2 inch seam allowance included in the pattern, so you don't need to be adding anything to the size that you're cutting out. Don't forget to also cut out interfacing for that waistband, because if you don't, it's not going to be supportive enough to fit tightly around your waist. In this tutorial, I'm using a canvas because I kind of wanted a French workwear vibe for my shorts and pants. For step 2, transfer all of the markings from the pattern onto your fabric to use as a guide and aid while you're sewing. Also make sure to cut out all of the notches. I wanted to keep this pattern super easy, so instead of doing a real fly zipper with a zipper guard, we're going to be doing a mock fly zipper. It's faster, it's easier, and once you learn it, you're going to do it over and over again. Just make sure to not forget to transfer all of these markings that I'm showing you now. For step 3, you're going to individually finish the raw edges of the 2 front pant pieces from the top of the mock fly zipper all the way down to the bottom of the inner pant leg seam. You have to do this separately before you sew any seams because after you attach the zipper, it's really difficult to do. Keep in mind, I don't want you trimming off any excess unless you're just cleaning up the edge or just making a clean finish on your serger. So just trim off a tiny little sliver as necessary. For step 4, you're going to be sewing between dot 1 and dot 2 that you marked on your pattern. I know this step may seem a little random, but it's really going to help you make that zipper perfect, and I've always had a hard time with zippers. So trust me when I say this is going to help you a lot. Step 5 is prepping the mock fly zipper flaps to attach your zipper. When looking at the wrong side, fold back the left mock fly flap 1 inch and then fold the right mock fly back 1.5 inches. The left side will be the underlap and the right side will be the overlap. The notches that I included in the pattern will help you find where to fold these back, but if you need to use a ruler, that's fine too. I also recommend marking where the bottom of your zipper stop will be. All of these markings are just useful guides to help you get that perfect finish. For step 6, we will be sewing the underlap to the zipper, which is the left side. Pin the zipper by lining the folded edge right up against those zipper teeth, and then you'll sew from the bottom all the way to the top, starting at the bottom of that zipper stop line. Make sure to use a zipper foot with your machine so you can sew super close to the edge. For step 7, we will be sewing the zipper to the overlap, which is the right hand side. Now technically you can have the overlap be the left or the right, but for this tutorial, for instructional purposes, that's how I'm teaching you to do it, because for a women's pant, the right hand side usually goes over the top. I did this twice, and the second time around, what I found was really helpful was to draw a guideline 1 inch from the edge on both sides, the inside and the outside, because you're going to align the outside of that zipper to that line, and then on the outside, you're going to be sewing on the inside of that line. And it's really important that you catch the zipper tape when you're sewing this. So by drawing the line, you know exactly where the zipper is when it's underneath the presser foot and you can't see it. Now, when you're drawing that guide on the outside, once you get past that line that marks where your zipper stop is, curve it inwards to where that seam was originally sewn between those 2 dots. Now, the curve doesn't have to be perfect, just arbitrarily draw it so that it looks like a standard pant fly. And once you're done, it should look something like this. Now, the rest is all downhill from here, which brings us into step 8, which is sewing the darts on the 2 front pieces and the 2 back pieces. I drew chalk guides just for instructional purposes, so this is optional, but it is helpful for sewing a perfectly straight line. But if you're experienced and you've sewn darts before, this is not super necessary. Now, if you've never made these pants before, I recommend sewing the darts with a basting stitch so that when you fit them in step 12, you can easily unpick them if you need to make any adjustments. Once you're done, it should look something like this. For step 9, you will be sewing the side seams of the 2 front pieces to the 2 back pieces, right sides together, matching notches. Again, if you haven't ever worn these pants before, a basting stitch will be easier to unpick if you have to make any adjustments afterwards. If you're working with a very slippery or super thick fabric, pins will help you keep the layers perfectly aligned. After you're done sewing that seam, go ahead and finish it with a serger, or if you're doing seam binding or a zigzag stitch, do that now. But only if you have sewn these pants before and you know exactly how they fit you. I don't recommend serging or trimming any excess fabric off until you have fit the pants to your body. For step 10, finish sewing down center front from where you stopped at dot number 2 on the 2 front pieces. And then do the same exact thing for the back, sewing from the top of center back all the way down to the bottom of the crotch on the 2 back pieces, matching those notches right sides together. And if you've done your fitting already, go ahead and finish those raw edges with a seam finish. For step 11, we will be sewing the inside pant legs. First, align the front and back crotch seam lines so that they are perfectly matching, and then also align the notches, keeping right sides together and pinning everything in place. Then sew from the bottom of one inside pant leg all the way to the bottom of the other pant leg in one single stitching line. And if you've done your fitting already, go ahead and finish off these raw edges. Finally, for step 12, we will be doing a fitting and making some additional markings. Now, it looks really sloppy in this video, but I actually am making 2 markings for where I want the knee patches. One where I want it if my knee were bent, and then where I would want it if I was just standing straight up. For the hem of the pant, I actually just roll it up where I would want the bottom of the pant to hit, and then I lay it flat out on the table, and then I slide my chalk between that fold and mark the bottom. But don't cut that off yet because we're going to be focusing mostly on the knee patches. Now for this pattern, I made 2 different kinds of knee patches. One is a triangle, and then I also made a circle. So whatever you decide to use is up to you, and of course the knee patches are optional to begin with. Now I only make markings on one side of the pant because you want to transfer the exact measurements to the other side. So just make sure that they're perfectly even because you don't want it to look asymmetrical. Now, if there were any other adjustments you needed to make to the waist or the hip, go ahead and do that now. For step 13, turn under the edges of the patches and the pockets and iron them down, or you can do some bias seam binding on the pocket, just trim off an inch from the top before you do this. Now, the curve is particularly difficult whether you're doing binding or just turning under the edge, so if you're a beginner and you're having some problems, just cut off that curve and just do a mitered corner. Now, when you're going to attach the patches and the pockets to the pants, I recommend using a lot of pins and some chalk guides that you drew beforehand, because once it's underneath the sewing machine, it's kind of hard to see where it's shifting or moving around. For my pant, I just decided to do one single stitching line super close to the edge by aligning it to the inside of my presser foot, but if you want, you can also do another line 1/4 of an inch from the edge on top of this outside one so that it looks like a double needle, which is typical for workwear or denim. And then for the pocket, I also did an additional tack stitch, which I did in the shape of a triangle at the top opening of the pocket for some extra durability. This is optional, but I do recommend it. Now back to the bias seam binding. An extra tip that might be helpful for you is to grade and clip those corners so that it provides you a little bit extra movement and ease when you're sewing down that bias seam binding. Now, when it comes to the pockets, sometimes it's personal preference where they're placed, so try them on one last time and make some markings before you sew them down. Just make sure not to sew the top closed because you want to be able to still use them as pockets. For step 14, you will be sewing the hem. Now, once you've marked that line, I would add an inch to the bottom of that line and then cut it because you measure twice and then you cut once. Always give yourself a little bit of breathing room. So after you cut off the bulk of that excess hem, try it on one last time so that you're fully confident with the length of your pant. Now, the type of hem I'll be doing with these pants is 1 1/4 inches. So you'll turn it under 1/4 of an inch, iron it down, and then turn it up again 1 inch so that the raw edge is encased. So keep that in mind when you're deciding on the length as well. The most important part is keeping an even distance from the bottom of the hem to where the needle pierces the fabric. Now, I like to align the fold of my hem to the inside of my presser foot, but it's more important to keep an even distance. Now you can turn up the bottom so that it's on the outside or it's on the inside. It's completely personal preference, but once you're finished, it should look something like this. For step 15, you will be attaching the waistband to the pants. The first step is ironing the interfacing to the wrong side of your fabric. Then I want you to mark with chalk on the right side a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the edge on the top and the bottom, and then on the left and the right hand side. And then on the right hand side, I want you to mark another 1 inch line from that 1/2 inch seam allowance line that you marked previously, and that will be your buttonhole overlap. You will align the line of that 1 inch mark to the end of the right hand mock fly overlap. And then on the left side of that waistband, I want you to align the 1/2 inch mark to the zipper teeth. And then go ahead and pin that waistband all the way around so that right sides are together and the facing is on the outside. Then go ahead and stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance from that raw edge, joining those two pieces together. Now I have to admit, here you can see me doing it on both pants, but on the shorts I actually did just a 1/4 inch seam allowance because I wanted to see what a thicker waistband would look like. So you can do this too if you want, but if you're working with a really difficult fabric or a fabric that frays a lot, I would just do the 1/2 inch seam allowance. It really didn't make that big of a difference. Once you're done sewing, go ahead and press all of those raw edges upwards so that they will be encased in the waistband when we turn it down. This is what it should look like once you're done with step 15. For step 16, we will be sewing the waistband ends. To do this, fold the waistband down so that right sides are together, and then stitch down on each end 1/2 inch from the edge. On the left side, I want you to get as close as you can to the zipper teeth without sewing through the zipper. You may want to trim down excess fabric and excess zipper tape from this area so that there's no excess bulk within your waistband. If, when altering these pants during step 12, you had to widen the waistline, take any excess fabric you may need in the waistband from the seam allowance instead of shortening that right hand side button overlap. It's really important that the right hand side button overlap is at least 1 inch. After you're done stitching these seams, go ahead and trim off any excess bulk, trim it towards the point, and turn it right side out. Once you're done, it should look something like this. For step 17, we're going to fold the raw edge of the waistband on the inside of the pant so that it's covering all of those raw edges on the waistline. To get that perfect finish, you want to align it to the stitching line of that first waistband seam you made in the previous step, and then sew it down so that the folded edge is aligned to the inside of your presser foot. Take your time, and if you need to baste it by hand first, that's okay. It took me a long time to do this confidently on my machine. Once you're done with step 17, it should look something like this. Our last step is sewing the buttonhole and the button. Once you've picked out your button, always test your buttonhole width on a scrap piece of fabric before doing it on your actual garment, because sometimes what your button foot may want you to do for your button is too big. So most of the time I end up making it a little bit smaller. Then I also recommend using a 1/4 inch sized button as an anchor on the inside of the pant for the exterior button. This provides a lot more extra durability and it looks a lot nicer too than a bunch of knots. And after this, you're all finished. If you guys have any tips, feedback, or suggestions, I would love to hear it. Just leave a comment below or message me on Etsy. I hope you guys liked this pattern and tutorial, and I can't wait to see what you guys make with it. Thanks for watching. Oh, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on any new releases of videos or patterns.